Hi everyone, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session with Rakuten Advertising. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join. I'm very conscious that today is quite the important day for many of you, not only because it is the last day, or rather the first day of this quarter, and only a few hours left before a long weekend, but especially being the first day of Q4 of this really interesting year that 2020 has been. Conscious that you'll have a lot of work to do, but hopefully we can make this next hour very valuable for us all, and that will be a good way to kickstart this quarter. My name is Camille. I am the Client Services Director at Rakuten Marketing Asia Pacific, and I'm joined today by Stuart McLennan, Senior Vice President in Asia Pacific. Hi, Stuart.
Hi guys, really looking forward to today.
So throughout this session, we will look to uncover some key insights and regional nuances for APAC consumers. And we hope that these strategies will help you propel growth across the region, not only for the next quarter, but also for the year to come in 2021. We will learn about how COVID has impacted APAC consumers, what APAC consumers want from brands during the pandemic and this next quarter. And we will look at the network trends and holiday predictions. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we will discuss how to use these insights to reach APAC consumers through performance marketing channels and to really ensure that there is consistent growth and you're making the most out of this holiday season coming up. The format of the presentation is going to be about 30 to 35 minutes of the formal presentation, followed by approximately 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. So we encourage you to join the Q&As and really take part and be active by going into a platform called Slido. You can right away go into www.slide.do and enter the code REACHAPAC. You will then, throughout the presentation at any time, have the ability to enter your questions. And at the end of the presentation, we will answer the questions that have been upvoted. So even if you don't have a question, feel free to have a read of the questions that are being submitted and upvote the one that interests you most. And Stu and myself will take the time to go through that together. And without further ado, Stu, over to you for the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cam, for the introduction. So kicking off with the first section, how COVID-19 has impacted APAC consumers. Each year around about this time, we run our e-commerce report across the APAC region. And it's obviously quite timely in running it to understand how COVID has impacted e-commerce within our region. So we surveyed about 5,000 people and consumers across the APAC region. So that's 10 countries within the region. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, please do so. There's a lot of detail in there. We're just going to touch on some of the key themes and more general themes. But as I say, you'll get country level, market level insight from our report. So what behavioral changes have we seen during COVID-19? I guess unsurprisingly, we've seen a large number of people shop online more frequently. So 46% of people across the region stated they shop online more frequently during the pandemic. 58% of total spend now going online, which is up from around about 30 to 40% previously. Groceries saw the largest increase, 34%, as people were unable to get to the shops during lockdown. Increasingly, people were turning to the online grocery retailers. Only a 13% increase in fashion. I think that's indicative of perhaps consumers being already fairly comfortable with online shopping for fashion. The industry is obviously well adapted with a lot of great features to encourage consumers to shop online, such as free returns and what have you. But it's great to see that, you know, despite the pandemic, despite the lockdown, people were increasing their spend in fashion. Unsurprisingly, again, 25% increased their spend on restaurant and takeaway. I think we're all being guilty of kind of getting a Deliveroo on Uber Eats during this pandemic. And even since lockdown, you know, personally, I've continued using those services, which, you know, hurts the bank and also hurts the waist, I guess. and 17% increase in online spend in media and games. So a lot of people spending more online, as you'd expect during the COVID pandemic. We asked each consumer whether they'd previously purchased online across several categories. And what we then saw was, of those that are first-time users of a specific category, how likely are they to continue using those services post-pandemic? So 49% of those surveyed said they'd continue to use video on demand. 67% said they'd continue to use food delivery. Grocery delivery is going to continue, so that'll be an interesting change in consumer behavior. BOPUS, I didn't know what this was until our marketing team told me. Buy online, pick up in store. So 63% of new users claimed that they would continue to use buy online, pick up in store. Interestingly, Google released some research in the last couple of weeks, and they have reported an extra 200,000 households now shopping online in the Australia-New Zealand region. So an increasing number of people online and an increasingly savvy population when it comes to buying online. Looking at some of the key markets in the region, those that our advertisers and publishers are most kind of engaged with, pulling out some key stats here. China, 33% of consumers prefer purchasing beauty and health from international brands. South Korea, big focus for a lot of our advertisers. Koreans spend 50% more on fashion than the average APAC consumer. No wonder many of our retailers are kind of keen to crack that market, given the high volume of spend within the fashion space. Singaporeans notoriously spendthrift, quite conscious of money and value. 63% of Singaporeans say that high shipping costs is a deterrent for completing an online purchase. So something for all of our advertisers to consider when approaching that market. Australia, 49% of Australians more likely to support local businesses during the pandemic. From our research and from Google's Retail Academy 2020 research, they're stating it's 61% shopping at local stores due to the importance for the community. So Australia very much looking at, buy local approach to products. And New Zealand, 72% of New Zealanders or Kiwis find new retailers through online search. This is interesting because many brands will see search as a brand play, be present on branded search, but clearly in New Zealand, it's also a discovery channel for many consumers when it comes to retail. Diving into the next section, what APAC consumers want from brands during the pandemic. We've pulled out a couple of markets as for a little bit more of a deep dive, but then we have some more general stats across the region. Again, I'd encourage you to download the report for a specific market insight and more information per market. So Australian consumers want brands to show empathy. 73% want brands to communicate with compassion, empathy, and facts. 71% prefer brands to include information on how they plan to continue operations. 62% think brands should advertise and communicate as usual, which is interesting. I don't know if you guys read Byron Sharp's article in Campaign recently saying that brands shouldn't be advertising. Our survey data suggests that the consumer is not that concerned about the brands advertising and actually want them to continue as per usual. 36% of Australians prefer brands to avoid humorous tones in their ads and communications. The other way to look at that is 64% want humour in their communications, which is true to the kind of Australian spirit. From a Chinese consumer's perspective, obviously a very different path through COVID. A lot of the restrictions have lifted, but when we ran this report, 87% of those surveyed said they want brands to offer discounts and benefits to frontline workers. 81% for brands to include information on how they're responding to COVID. 79% think brands should suspend normal production to produce essentials. So very much looking at a health-first approach in terms of messaging with the Chinese consumers. So across APAC, what did we see? We saw most markets report that they want to see offer contactless delivery or buy online, pickup in store. They want to be shopping through local businesses. Shipping and delivery is increasingly important, offering quick delivery options and free shipping. And I guess most importantly, sales offers and discounts are increasingly important in this Q4 period, both through our research and Google research. Google research showed 50% of people more focused on products and sales of products in post-pandemic, and our research showed about 70% across most markets really focusing on sales, offers and discounts as an influence of their purchase decisions. So something for all of us to consider as we approach Q4. So diving into our own network data, so the data that kind of we have based on our platform, the consumers, publishers, and advertiser sites. What are we wanting to call out? I think it's no surprise to anyone, and I'm sure we're all aware that this Q4 is probably the most important in memory. Q4 with the global financial crisis was obviously significant, but I'd say this is even more significant given the shock to retail that happened during kind of lockdown and the ceasing of kind of travel internationally. Over the past few years, we've seen the market shaped by key retailer events, so Click Frenzy and Singles Day, and also an increasing number of publishers leading their own shopping events. And we see this trend being just as important, if not more important, this year. And brands really need to be aware of these events and have clear strategies to take advantage of these events. I mean, if you look at Singles Day in China, 2019, there was $52 billion of sales in a single day. So any brand that's wanting to be active in China and reach consumers needs to have a very clear Singles Day strategy. Consider the importance of live streaming and influencers in the Chinese market. We also see in Southeast Asia publishers or e-commerce sites such as Lazada and Shopee having their 10-10, 11-11, 12-12 events, and increasingly driving significant volumes of sales. In Australia, less of a priority, I guess, but obviously for Australia, it's Black Friday and Cyber Monday, the events that were initially started by kind of Amazon in the US has gone global, and in Australia, these are big events for people to be conscious of and ensure they have a pricing strategy and promotion strategy that really dials into these huge events. An interesting point from the Google research as well showed that 55% of shoppers expect to finish their holiday shopping before December. So again, it highlights the importance of the likes of Click Frenzy, Cyber Monday, and Black Friday. Get that right, and you'll have a good Q4. Get that wrong, and you'll be scrambling through December with only 4 out of 10 consumers likely to be finishing up their shopping in that period. So key trends for our APAC network. We've seen across all categories the average order value decline by 10 to 15%. We've seen more sales. Our network's grown considerably over this period, but average order value has declined by 10 to 15%. On the flip side, footwear, surprisingly, AOV has increased by 20%. It continues to rise every month since June after lockdown has lifted. So that was quite an interesting surprise for us. And shoppers look towards content and deal sites in the affiliate channel during lockdown. We saw a huge surge in visits to content sites. We were able to verify that across the likes of SimilarWeb, which showed data, with shoppers and consumers visiting a lot more content sites during lockdown as they were researching their products more. So data from our network, site traffic has varied across APAC during different phases of lockdown. Usually what we've seen in China and Australia and other countries is that content sites have gone up. and also people are looking more for kind of loyalty and rewards. I also want to point out, given that we're thinking about Q4 right now, big surge in November expected when it comes to shopping and loyalty. So again, people will be researching in November ahead of their kind of their purchasing for the holiday season, and also taking advantage of some of the big sales periods such as 11/11 and Black Friday. So what's changed, knowing that we've got advertisers and publishers who focus on different verticals, what's changed year over year on our network? With the exception of travel, all are up year on year. Travel is down 38%, which some of you may be surprised by given the shutdown of travel, but the travel industry was actually having a massive Q1, significant year on year growth, probably expecting a terrific 2020. But you know, since Q2 and into Q3 and Q4, not much is happening for them, unfortunately. What I find particularly interesting about this slide is that those verticals, those sectors where you probably had an already fairly advanced consumer online shopping attitude, they only saw, you know, kind of double-digit 44, 20% growth. Still significant, but pales in comparison to some of the triple-digit growth we saw across beauty, food and drink, lingerie, surprisingly, and pets. So, you know, what we want to call out here is that those sectors where online shopping was already fairly well established, they've grown, but those where perhaps it was more of an offline purchase behavior have seen significant growth. So it'll be interesting to see whether that continues through you know, and changes consumer behavior in the long term. You know, considering beauty, very much an offline purchase, beauty brands I've worked with in the past would report 5 to 10% of sales online. Will we see that shift to closer to 20, 30%? Google research that we've referenced a couple of times, their data is showing that most e-commerce sites were kind of delivering 10 to 15% on average, now 20, 25%. So hopefully you guys are seeing kind of such a similar uptick in online, if not more, but it'll be interesting to see how this continues through Q4 and 2021. So we've picked out 4 sectors just to look at in terms of, this is actually search traffic data. So from Google Trends, what actually happened during COVID and what's happened since, so we can predict what might happen in the future. So for fashion and apparel, we saw across all keywords a decline, quite a sharp decline during that early lockdown period. But it's great to see things kind of returning back to some form of normality. You know, dresses approaching or getting close to some of the levels pre-COVID, pants up and continuing to be up, which is obviously quite interesting. Swimsuits, naturally would expect it to increase as we get into the summer season in Australia and New Zealand. Food and drink, again, quite interesting. You saw a significant increase in people searching for banana bread. I think we all saw on Instagram and kind of WhatsApp groups, everyone posting images of their banana bread and their baking skills. And this data clearly shows that intent it spiked, but it's continuing to be pretty high in terms of that change in consumer behavior. We laughed at the Corona beer spikes. I think obviously people at first were thinking it was funny, search Corona beer, have Corona beer parties, and we have, can you guys still hear me, I hope? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think Cam's paused on my screen, so apologies about that. Okay, so where was I? So looking at, going back to food and drink, what's another interesting point from this to highlight? You know, everyone knows Melbourne loves coffee, and you know, as they entered the second lockdown, there's a big surge in searches for coffee maker. So just some interesting insights that we're seeing from Google search trend data. In terms of footwear, big surprise to see sneakers actually increase year over year in terms of people searching for sneakers, and would expect that to continue. And with higher average order values, this is great for our advertisers and publishers who focus on that specific part of the market. Heels has declined naturally as people are less time in the office. I know obviously Cam, she loves heels. She herself has reduced the number of heels she's buying on a regular basis. And running shoes, we've seen a sharp increase in running shoes, and it continues as people are looking to be more healthy during the COVID period. Luxury and jewellery, obviously very high average order values, and took a big hit initially across our network in terms of revenue sales initially, although it's bouncing back now, and similar trends we see through Google Trends. We've picked out a few brands to show how they're performing, the likes of Gucci, Rolex, getting close to similar demands that we saw in 2019. So good news, hopefully, for the luxury and jewellery vertical in Q4. So I'm going to hand over to Cam to finish up with how you can use these insights to reach APAC consumers in the Q4 period.
So in terms of the strategies, you've all heard some very interesting insights throughout the presentation, but what we really wanted to make sure is that we leave you with some actionable strategies that you can really start implementing as soon as today. For many of you, plans have started long ago into preparing for Q4, but there is still some changes and some adaptation that you can have today that would really fuel the next quarter. So for many, it's a change. The pandemic has been a lot of adaptation and a lot of, uncertainty and stress. But at the same time, what we've heard through what Stu covered is also an opportunity and a lot of hope. We can see that traffic is becoming more consistent and regrowing to what it used to be like prior to the pandemic. And with that, consumers are going across many more online channels, and they're interacting with brands in many different ways through content sites and through research and discovery sites. So don't be afraid to try something new. It may be that every quarter you do the same thing. This time around, really don't be afraid to adapt and try, especially with performance marketing, where it's quite a cost-effective model. Now, and your brand is where the consumer is coming. Make sure that you also are reaching your consumer with the right message. Adapt your message and really give your consumers what they want to hear. So in Australia, it's that empathy and that factual message. You can have a tone of humor, but be sure to be empathetic. And lastly, you're speaking to your consumers, they're engaged, they've discovered your brand, ensure that they convert, and do so by being very conscious of your shipping cost. We know that that has been quite a deterrent where shipping costs are high. So where possible, aim to protect your margin in other areas, but with shipping, keep that as cost as possible. Offering things like strategies to up your average order value if needed, bundling products if needed, so that you can have an offer where possible, at least of free shipping. Into the next slide. Also looking at not neglecting your upper funnel publishers. More than ever, through the opportunity of increased content and more shoppers being online, you want them to discover your brand, and they often do so through discovery. So whilst typically you may be investing most in loyalty and rewards type publisher, don't forget to think of your content publishers. They are the first touch point to your brand, and they're also where you can push more of those higher value products and those full price products. It's really where you're going to be able to have most of an impact in that early stage. Be smart with your dynamic commissioning strategies. Where possible, look at commissioning on first click to really reward those publishers without having to invest necessarily on those very heavy flat fee placements. Onto what Stu was mentioning around consumer and the O2O strategy. So really having a holistic approach to your message. You want to have a coherent message through all spaces and all areas. You know, it's important to have a message that is online and is true to your branding, but that also translate well offline, because we do know that some consumers will still want to touch and experience the product and go in store, as well as actually come into your store to pick up. They buy online and they go pick up in store. So make sure that you don't completely move away from having an interesting and cohesive experience in your stores. And lastly, a message that is really important is that through the last few months, dealing with a lot of advertisers and publishers, what we've seen is a lot of jerky decisions around the affiliate model, especially where people have been very conscious of their budgets, potentially have been looking to save on cost. Really, what is important here and what is the main question is not necessarily how much are you looking to spend in your channels, but rather how much would you like to generate? And based on that, have an ROI goal and design your entire strategy around that. So hopefully some of those strategies are helpful. And now we look forward to answering some of your questions that hopefully have come up. So we'll take a look at the Slido. Few great questions have come up already. You still have time if you haven't yet voted for questions, or if you have just thought of a question that you would like to ask. So feel free to now go into the www.slide.do channel and enter the code REACHAPAC. I will be sure to read the questions, that I'm conscious you're not seeing them. So our first question today is...
Yeah, just to build on that, I know the question that came through was from Andy via the comments in the chat. The big question was, you know, are we tracking consumer electronics and technology, and why was it not covered? So in the research and the survey, we didn't specifically ask consumers about that specific vertical or product, but within our network data, we can obviously pull out that information. We haven't done so in this, but Andy, I'm sure we can follow up with some data and understand kind of what you're looking for.
And the next question has just come in around, have there been any significant advances with upper funnel publishers in Australia specifically? The short answer is yes, absolutely. More than ever, we've seen broad media and news websites actually leveraging white label voucher solutions. So whereby they're typically a site for discovery, news reading, they are now actually shifting into also becoming a place of discovery and shopping through those white label solutions. So we do encourage you to engage with this type of website and really familiarize yourself with them. Because more than ever, they're quite holistic in what and quite comprehensive in what they offer. So I would say that is the biggest shift at this point.
And Cam, do you want to reference the multi-touch commissioning and how advertisers can use that to start understanding the impact of content publishers on that path to purchase?
Absolutely. So Rakuten has released dynamic commissioning about a year ago, and it has been really interesting to see how throughout the pandemic, advertisers have really taken on board that tool and those solutions in order to protect their margins, but also become a lot smarter and better spread the commission that they pay out to publishers, bringing more of that commission towards the upper funnel publishers. That is starting with your likes of your influencers, but also your very large media houses type of websites, where you used to pay potentially a very large placement, homepage type takeover. Now Rakuten, through dynamic technology, has the ability to pay on first click. And what that means is that you can engage with those websites in a cost-effective way, where you have a look back window on the first click of anywhere between 7 to 14 days. And you can really encourage those websites that perhaps used to lose out in the last click type channel that affiliate marketing is, and actually pay earlier on with a first click. You can spread that commission in two as well by doing first and last click commissioning, perhaps instead of paying 10%, paying 5 and 5. But just really getting smart around it. We have so many advertisers doing it really, really well. So we encourage you to ask us more questions around it. Another way that dynamic commissioning can be interesting is if you're looking at an in-store strategy. Some of the ways that we're seeing advertisers use it is by paying more commissions for sales driven out of certain areas, as an example. So if you were looking to send people in Victoria back into stores, as an example, you could be paying more commission in certain areas. So quite a few fields that are available to really get smart and diverse in the way that you pay your commission and therefore protect your margins. Do we have any stats on Afterpay use? That is a good question, actually. Yeah.
There was a follow-up question that came through. How do we measure the effectiveness of content publishers?
Interesting. How do we measure it? Well, through that, actually. So with dynamic commissionings, what we have also found is that some advertisers are dipping their toes into it, because to date, unless they had internal tracking solutions that were a bit more comprehensive, they weren't necessarily able to see with proper transparency what were those upper funnel publishers bringing and what were they contributing into their program. So what many have done is actually to start for a period of 4 to 6 weeks in having a 0% commissioning solution, whereby they were able to track what were those first initiating clicks. And then once they have discovered that, they started then commissioning and making decisions based on that. So it was a bit more of an educated way that they could design their strategies around it. Hopefully that answers the question. And then I think you're seeing questions potentially that I'm not seeing in real time, Stu. So if any other ones have come in, please jump in.
No, there's a couple coming in. You want to go back to the Afterpay question?
Yes. Do we have any stats on Afterpay use? So we know that Afterpay has really reshaped the retail landscape in Australia. Afterpay Day in 2020, I believe it was in May, actually was one of our largest day on records. So definitely much like Click Frenzy used to do in previous years, where that event was reshaping the retail behavior and the shopping behavior of Australians. We do know that Afterpay has also had a similar impact, if not a bigger impact. Also interesting and putting on everyone's radar, the entry of Klarna into the market, a similar solution to Afterpay, but which is also starting to impact how people are shopping and how they are interacting. What has been interesting is that we thought that with not only the pandemic, but early signs of a recession and warning sign of a recession, people may become more concerned about their spending and perhaps not want to have as much of those type of involvement. And actually that hasn't been true. People haven't changed the way they're using Afterpay as far as we can see. Interesting questions coming in as we speak. Are you seeing people being more loyal to brands on stores when they buy, or is price comparison and switching for best price expected to continue to grow? A very good question. And what we've seen is that people increasingly are shopping based on product rather than necessarily brand loyalty. That is often coming from the fact that they're very price conscious. Hence the importance of having not only really strong offers, deals, bundling, potentially personalized offers available, but also having a strategy which is product first. If you have new products, make sure that they adapt into the demand of the consumers, and make sure that you have offers like free delivery, because as mentioned, your product speaks, and if you've managed to engage the consumer all the way into your basket and your website where they're ready to make a purchase, but if perhaps they are being turned away by high shipping costs, or perhaps by looking for a discount code that is not available. So have that in mind when you're designing your strategy, to make sure that those discount codes, if available on site and if they can be used, they are easily accessible, perhaps by engaging with those type of publishers that highlight them to you very easily, and also by being conscious of your shipping. What other countries in Australia, sorry, let me read the question and then I'll read it to you. Right, the question is, in what other countries are Australian brands seeing success? Are we seeing success across Asia, Korea, China? A very good question. What we often see and what has been really, really interesting is seeing Australian brands want to enter new markets. There has been quite a large push towards the US, interestingly, but within Asia, Korea, I would say, is by far the largest, most accessible market. That has been partly driven by some of the publishers and strategic partnerships that we've built in those markets. Some with the largest bank, like Sheehan Bank, which is an exclusive partnership that we have. Some very strategic partnerships with American Express that we've had for a few years, but have really taken off to new heights. We know that Koreans are by far the most engaged and savvy shoppers. So they will be brand conscious, but they will want to discover new brands and really invest in it. So that can take off like wildfire very quickly if you can have the right entry in that market. China has also been recognized. China is a bit more intricate, but also, of course, very large. So even if you were to make a small push into China, it's likely that the results are going to be really big comparatively. One that has initially decreased early on throughout the pandemic was Singapore. We saw a slight decrease there, but interestingly, that has really started to shape up again and really increase. So those markets are definitely markets that you will want to have on the top of your list, especially with performance marketing, where it's quite cost effective, and you can really use, the mindset of the after pandemic mindset, where people are regaining confidence and wanting to shop, wanting to discover. There's really an optimism that is going to start emerging in the market. So that's a perfect opportunity to enter a new market and try something new, going back to that point. I think unless we have any last minute questions, we'll be able to thank you for your time and let you finish your lunch quietly without my French accent and us being there. But hopefully you've enjoyed and have gained a lot of value out of this presentation. I know that I certainly have enjoyed spending that time with you. I apologize once again for that slight tech issue in the middle, but that is the reality of working from home. And yeah, thank you for your time, and over to you, Stu, for a few last words.
Yeah, thank you, Cam, and I appreciate those technical challenges were a bit of a distraction, but hopefully you all gathered some useful information there. So thank you for your time. Thank you for taking some time out of your lunch to listen to us and hear what we have to say and some of the insights we have. Do reach out to us. I think we'll be sending a follow-up email with some content. And if you want any more information, then do let us know. Reach out to your AM if you want anything extra. So I wish you all the best of luck in Q4. We're here to help as much as we possibly can. And hopefully when we host the next webinar in Q1, we'll all be toasting a very successful end to the year.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon and enjoy the long weekend. Bye, guys.